And when I quit the booking committee, I got off my prescription Zantac.
He needs no introduction. He was on camera, he was creative, and we're going to have some fun tackling 1990. Let's jump right in. On January 6th...
Wait a minute, he needs no introduction so you don't give me one.
Absolutely
I'm
not.
Jim Cornette. Hi, how are you?
Absolutely.
Who are you again?
Fuck, man, if they bought it, they know.
All
Who the hell
right,
pays $25 for a DVD today?
By the way, unlike other people who just make this shit up out of their memory, I've got all the documentation, we got the paperwork, we got the contemporaneous notes. I was James Comey before Comey was cool. And of course, you can't get this anymore. Try it on eBay if you're lucky.
Now, if you have the 1989 edition and also the WWE timeline from 1997, you know that these are the authentic articles here. We have formats, we have payoffs, we have the road schedule here in the date book. And before we went on, I said to Jim, you're so fastidious with this. Were you fearing a lawsuit someday? What was it? And your answer was?
I'm anal retentive and obsessive compulsive, and I always needed to know these things. And plus I paid $36 for the motel that night in Atlanta. The boys got a rate because it was an income tax, because I always paid mine, unlike a lot of the other boys. And I have every book since 1983, et cetera, et cetera.
For your edification.
For your edification, enlightenment, and entertainment.
One of these guys who just show up, disappear, and never be heard from again, right?
Never.
Tell me the circumstances of his coming into the company.
I called Dutch Mantell. I said, "You got a 7-foot guy?" He said, "Yeah, I got." Well, no, seriously, because we had the skyscrapers, right? Spivey and Sid, and which one got hurt then? Who did Mark replace? Was it Mark replaced Sid? Because Sid was hurt that time.
Yes.
And so we had no skyscrapers. And I, of course, got all the territory tapes. I was the only one that was actually watching the other wrestling programs. And the Master of Pain, Under the Mask, was in Memphis, USWA at the time, and Dutch was over there. And I called Dutch. I said, "Who's the big guy, and is he any good?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "He's green, but he's a great kid. He's going to be great. He's got a wonderful attitude. He listens." I said, "Can we have him?" He said, "Fuck to make that much money." He said, Dutch had the famous line one time when Jerry Jarrett said, "Boys, don't be on those steroids. We're going to work with Vince." And Dutch said, "Hell, Jerry, the way you're paying us, we can't afford to be on food." So, Dutch's word was good enough for me, and we brought him over, and Terry Funk named him because Mark Calloway, And we were thinking, what can we call him? What can we call him? And Terry Funk said, "What about Mark Callous? Like he's callous and cruel." And, it's okay. Works for us. And so at least we had one skyscraper that would fucking listen.
Remember what happened with Sid?
Not that particular time, honestly. No, Sid,
Okay.
there was always an injury or something was hurt or it was softball season or whatever the case. Ric Flair wanted to work with Bobby Eaton. He'd never had a singles match with Bobby. And he specifically, because Flair was the booker at that time, I guess we should preface this by saying that Ric Flair had demanded the book the previous August or September of '89 because things were in such dire straits. And that's when he asked me to be on the committee along with Kevin Sullivan. And the people that were on the committee that were already there and we couldn't really do anything about was obviously Jim Herd. Barnett was on it. Jody Hamilton sat in on the meetings, not knocking Jody, but he's primarily, he got the rings places and booked the job guys and everybody. And plus he was a wrestling legend in the Atlanta area. So, and then there were some other rotating members at Jim Ross, because he was working in the office. He was always in the meetings. And then when Herd retired Terry Funk after the I Quit match in New York the previous November on the Clash, he retired Terry without asking him if he wanted to retire first. And so they put Terry on the committee, and we'll talk about the committee dynamics here shortly. But anyway, Rick wanted to work with Bobby Eaton, and we wanted to put it on the main event. So we did the first match, and Rick didn't want to beat Bobby, so we did a DQ. Well, when we did the DQ, Herd went ballistic because how did Bobby Eaton get a world title match? What, he drop in out of a helicopter and Ric Flair can't even beat Bobby Eaton? And he just made such a goddamn stink about it that Rick said, "Okay." He said, "We're going to have another one." And this time I did the finish. I said, "Okay." In this match, Rick and Bobby had another great match. And then Stan tried to interfere, and Rick foiled Stan's interference, threw him out of the ring, jerked me in the ring, grabbed my racket, knocked me out the ring with my own racket, then beat Bobby 1, 2, 3 in the middle of the ring and stood with his hand up in the air with all three of us laying out there. And I said, okay, let the fucking bastard bitch about that. And he did, of course, because we covered in the previous volume, Buy It, that he didn't like the Midnight Express, he didn't want to use them, he didn't like me, blah, blah, blah. But here's the problem. The problem is that the first Sunday night main event on TBS on December 3rd with Ric Flair versus Bobby Eaton did a great rating. And the second match that aired on January 7th did a 3.2 rating and a 5.0 share. That was 1,667,000 homes. I have the official TBS printout, by the way, here, which was the highest rated Sunday night TBS main event show since, you guessed it, the December 3rd show, were the first Flair and Eaton match. So he was doing these numbers, and the fucking bastard couldn't get over it and wouldn't stop bitching.
But does
about
no
it.
one say to him?
Yeah, I did all the time. That's why he didn't like me. Sort of like when everybody tells Trump you're a fucking lying sack of shit, that he is. And, you know, he doesn't like it because truth hurts.
Why was the decision made to go from Muta to Arn?
Well, there was just no particular reason otherwise than try to get some heat on the heels, I'm sorry, not heat on the heel, but at that time Arn was a babyface, try to get some heat on the Horsemen, because as you will recall from 1989, you got to package these things. So if they don't have 89, they can buy the set. Herd had fucked the Horsemen. Flair had made the arrangement for Arn and Tully to come back to WCW from the WWF. And they had agreed to for $250,000 a year apiece. And then on the way out, when they were finishing up, Tully flunked the drug test.
Right.
Because he didn't give a shit. So when Herd heard about that, he rescinded the offer to Tully. So Tully had quit his job in the WWF and on Ric Flair's say-so, because he had Herd's word that he could offer these guys this money. And then Herd pulled that back, so that effectively ended Tully's Major League Wrestling career because he'd quit on Vince and couldn't go to WCW. And since Herd said that Tully and Arn were more valuable as a team than individuals, he dropped Arn's offer to $150,000.
Yeah, I remember.
So all of a sudden, Arn left a job where he was making really good money to come back for a job that he's now making $100,000 a year less at. And that pretty much effectively ended, for at least the next couple of years, anybody coming from the WWF to WCW, because now they had established